Hi everyone, welcome to Tales of Dread. Before we get into the stories, please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Thanks. Now let's get into the story. When I go to see my parents, I usually take at least one day to go deep sea fishing. I don't know, it's kind of become a tradition, and I really liked being out here all by myself. The boat my dad has isn't made for rough water. It's only 14 feet long, but if you know how to use it and the weather is good, you can get where you want to go. Alright. When I went outside in the morning, the sky was clearer, there were no clouds, and there wasn't much wind. I was really excited to just hang out on the deep blue, catch some fish, and enjoy being alive. I didn't go to more than 3 places very often. How nice and quiet it was where I had fished before and caught some good fish. It took me about 40 minutes to get to the first spot from the old lighthouse. When I got there, I set up my chair and put my fishing rod on the ground. I didn't expect a huge catch, but I'd never left that spot before without something. I sat there for maybe 20 minutes before I got tired, and that's when I saw them fucking harbor porpoises. Don't get me wrong, I think they're great. But you know that when you see them, there won't be a fish for miles. Spot. Number 2, at that time I hadn't been there in years, and getting between the rocks was a little hard, but it wasn't something I hadn't done before. Even though the weather was still fine, the wind was getting a little stronger. Still, it was worth the extra 40 minutes it took to get there. From that spot, you could see the far peninsula, which is a very beautiful place that tourists love. I sat there for about an hour without doing anything before I realized something was wrong. This long shouldn't be needed to catch anything. I stood up and looked around. As soon as I did, I saw something in the water moving up and down, but it was hard to see over the waves. Fuck me. Another sure sign is a harbor seal. There wouldn't be a fish in sight. Those thieves? I mean, cute animals are even worse than the purpose, which is that they are great hunters that all fishermen hate. I got angry and yelled at it, then looked at the engineer again. I still wasn't giving up. I still had to check out the third and last place. I hadn't been there in maybe 3 years, and that was because it wasn't an easy place to find or get to. It took me an hour, which was way too long, but I had to be careful. I used to know where every rock was hiding. Every risk is learned by heart, but it was getting old. I was so close. When something I never thought would happen did, I hit something hard. I wasn't even going that fast, but when I came to my senses, the impact almost threw me overboard. I didn't think what I was seeing was real. It was a door, but not one that floated like trash or anything else. Instead, it was a door made of wood that was firmly rooted in the water. It was painted a bright white color and had a dream on top. The handle was curved and ended in something that looked like a gargoyle. It looked like something from a Gothic mansion, and I just stood there and looked at it for a long time. I didn't know what to think about it. Should I call someone, mark it down on the map in the end? I did the only sensible thing. I kicked it carefully, at first just a few light taps with my boot, then harder, and finally with all my strength. What it was didn't matter much because it wasn't going anywhere. So I did it. Now, pay attention. Don't be a jackass if you ever come across something even remotely like this. Don't be a moron. Don't be like me, don't open. That's what I want to say. I had to get the oars out and line up the boat with the door so I could grab the door handle. I then had to use some force to pull the door open. I don't know if you've ever seen a movie where the opening scene is a long-lost tomb, but it was just like that. A gust of wind blew the thing open, and there was a strange sound like you might hear in a room that is slowly letting air out. I looked down through the boat's side into the hole where the fish were kept. I couldn't see much except for the stairs that led straight down into the abyss. Second warning. Don't be a fucking idiot, and open a door in the middle of the sea. Don't be stupid. Don't be like me. I'm saying, don't go down the stairs. If there was an emergency backpack on the boat, my dad wouldn't let me off without it. Not much, really? A few bottles of water, a few cans of food, a flashlight, some matches, and a change of clothes were enough. I wish I could say that I thought long and hard about all the possible outcomes, but I didn't. I was, as was already said, an idiot. I tied the boat to the door handle as quickly as I could, and you did it a few times to make sure it would hold. Then I got out of the boat and began going down the stairs. Have you ever heard of a cyclopean? It's the best word I could find in the dictionary to describe the stairs that lead down. It's very old and very big. The walls were made of smooth, carved, huge blocks that were put together in perfect patterns. I had to go down the steps one at a time, and I soon realized I was in way over my head, but I couldn't turn around. I couldn't get up again. This was important and a wonder of archaeology. I thought I was at least 100 feet below the surface when I finally reached the bottom. I just stood there quietly while the flashlight turned on. Strange, mysterious architecture is taking shape in front of me. A long, narrow hallway led straight into the dark. I stopped to catch my breath, and then I just started walking down it. No fear and no care. It felt like I had no choice but to be down there. I started to see strange cliffs and symbols I had never seen before on the smooth walls. I've seen Egyptian, Mesopotamian, Sumerian, Akkadian, and other ancient ruins and carvings, but none of them were even close to these. They look very strange, as if the things they show have never been seen by humans. After about 10 minutes of walking, they came to a fork in the road and had to decide which way to go. I knew it would be easy to get lost down there, so I spent a while trying to figure out the best way to mark my way. I really didn't want to touch the walls, so I thought I'd just drop some water on the floor at regular intervals to show where I'd been. I picked the right path at random and kept walking, amazed at how big the place was. I don't know how many of those sections I passed, but it had to be at least 5. Every time, I chose a random path and made sure to splash a good point of water where I came from. At some point, the hallway got smaller and smaller until they could barely move through it. I don't know if you're claustrophobic, but I'm getting more and more so, and I'm very claustrophobic now, but I still used myself to go further and further in England. I began to hear the sounds. I'll never forget this sound from my childhood. I was like my grandfather's farm, but proper might not have been the right word. He hit the poor pigs with a big axe and chopped at the soft flesh of their necks until they stopped moving. That noise made by the axe getting deeper and deeper into the body. The exact same sound echoed through the house, and then high-pitched wheels that sounded like animal cries came next. I freaked out. I don't mind saying that at that point, I finally came out of my stupor, joined himself, and ran as fast as I could back the way I came until the son who was waiting died out. But it was quickly replaced by another sound. At first, I couldn't really hear it because I was too busy freaking out. As I got to the crossing, I could hear bare feet slamming into the ground. To get my bearings, I had to slow down. When I saw it, it was then. It was coming at me way too fast and jumping into the air at random times. Even today, I still have problems describing it. I don't think any language, including ours, has enough words to describe that terrible thing. It was big, about twice as big as me, and it moved on 6 long legs. Only they weren't arms or legs. Instead, they looked like tentacles with bones sticking out at weird angles. Its skin was so pale that it almost seemed to glow when you looked at it. The head was the most human part of it, as far as I can tell. It had teeth, but they weren't sharp or anything. Its whole head is made up of huge, oversized human teeth that are all human. I was finished, I knew it. I'd died. I got down on my knees, closed my eyes, cried, and shook. I was hoping for a quick and painless end, but it never came. Instead, the creature brushed past me quickly, knocking me into the wall with the force of the men and continuing down the hallway. A few seconds later, I couldn't even hear his strange limbs moving. I fell to my feet because I was so shocked. It took me a while to figure out what had happened and even longer to figure out that I was in trouble. There was no flashlight. As I climbed around panically in the pitch black, I found pieces of it on the ground, but they were too broken to put back together. I had to fight with all of my pockets to get my phone. He did have a light, but it wasn't very good, but it would have to do. I had to get back as quickly as I could. To see anything, I had to shine the light very close to the ground, which basically meant I had to crawl. It took me a while, but after some trouble at first, I started to find small pools of water that were like breadcrumbs. I followed the trail for what felt like hours, and by this time, my knees were bloody and hurting, but I kept going because I wanted to get out of there. I just knew it. But as I turned a corner, my hope turned into complete despair. It was the thing. It was dead and just lying still in a deep pool of blood on the ground. And I hadn't been following the breadcrumbs. I had been following that horrible thing's bloody trail. I cried myself to sleep on the ground because I was so tired. I had no idea what to do or how to move forward. I knew I would never be able to find the trail again. I got lost down in the Cyclopean vault and was doomed to rot and die. No. Diaz was in it. I didn't want to just give up, so I got to my feet, staggered, and started moving carefully in any direction I could to find a way back to the surface. Go back up to where the light and life are. I have no idea how long. I kept doing this. I'm guessing a few hours, but you'd be surprised at how much you can handle when tested. The will of a person is truly amazing. I was sweating, crying, and bleeding, and I was almost out of my mind when I finally ran into them on the stairs I had just left. I think it was a way to let go of everything and get sane and clear-headed again. I'm not sure. I'm no shrink. But I can say that I climbed those steps faster and harder than anyone else. I threw open the door and breathed in the fresh, salty air of the sea. I've never felt more alive. I carefully climbed out of the pit, but then I realized I should have waited. Where I was, you are. The boat couldn't be found anywhere, and I couldn't for the life of me figure out what was around me. On the shore, there were no buildings or other landmarks that stood out. I had no idea where I was, and it was getting dark and cold. After everything that had happened, was this it? Was it going to freeze to death on the door in the middle of the ocean? Well, I can tell you that I didn't die from being cold. It is. My phone still has power. So I could call my dad and tell him where the GPS said we were. He called the Coast Guard, and when they came, they found me holding on to the broken pieces of the north wooden door. After about 30 minutes, I was still a long way from my boat. Several hundred miles. I have no idea how or where the door disappeared. I almost thought I was sitting on it when the Coast Guard came to get me. But I wasn't thinking very clearly. So I really don't remember. I told him what had happened. I told everyone I met about what had happened. I knew no one would believe me, though. How did they do it? It was just a silly dream brought on by being too cold. Right? All I know is that I would see you again if I ever saw a door. I'm getting out of the funk. I don't know what's down there yet. What that thing was, how it got there, and why that place exists. But what worries me the most is what keeps me awake at night. The thing I saw often comes back to me in my nightmares. Based on the size of the creature that brushed past me, one can't even begin to imagine how big, strong, or scary whatever killed it must have been. There's something strange, terrible, and beyond description down there, and I don't want to find it.